Good evening, everyone, and thanks for being here. I really appreciate you coming out tonight. Tonight's meeting is about really the number of bomb scares we've had at the high school, and to give you as parents an opportunity to ask questions. We have some guests tonight. Our principal speaker tonight is going to be Sergeant Dade from the State Police. He's the commander of the bomb squad for the state of New Hampshire. So Sergeant Dade did a great presentation to your children just before we broke for vacation. We broke the kids into freshmen, sophomores, and juniors and seniors. The kids, your children, were fantastic. They were attentive. They asked great questions, and we expect the same from their parents. The next guest is our local chief of police, Chief Kurz. This is the chief of Durham. The high school and middle school come under his jurisdiction, and he's been an awesome partner with the school system. Next to Chief Kurz is Holly Molaski. Officer Molaski is our SRO in the high school, generally speaking. She's at our high school almost every single day. She interacts with your children on a professional basis as a resource, but also gives us advice as we need it at the school. And our high school principal, Ms. Filippone, who is new to us this year, and I kind of feel bad that she's getting this orientation into our high school, because what I've shared with her is what's so distressing about what's been going on is we have no history of this at Oyster River High School. And so it's been incredibly distracting. When we get to the question and answer component of this, you as parents could ask any one of us a question. So if you want to direct your question to someone specifically, myself or Suzanne or the sergeant or the chief or the officer, please feel free to do so. If you don't have a person that you are directing your question at, then I'll just kind of moderate and say, I think that question makes the most sense for Sergeant Dade, or that question makes the most sense for our resource officer and so forth. So our principal speaker tonight, Sergeant Dade, I welcome you to the podium, and thank you for being here.
Good evening. I wasn't aware that I was going to be the principal speaker. I thought I was actually being sent here as backup. I'll do my best with it. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a privilege actually to stand here before you. I got to tell you, this is the first time that I've ever appeared before a parent forum to talk about this subject. So this is as new to me as it probably is to most of you. So maybe together we'll get through it. So I've had occasion to come here now, or my squad has, I think 3 times in the last several months for bomb threats. And these things tend to be really challenging for communities of any size, quite frankly, but particularly for communities of the size of Durham, where resources are somewhat limited, and particularly if we don't have a whole lot of experience in dealing with them. And I would like to just preface everything I'm about to say with your kids are in really good hands. I've been all over this state. I've been doing this since 1999. And I've seen these things go really, really well, and I've seen them go less than that, sometimes really, really poorly. And what I would tell you is things, despite the lack of experience, things here in Durham have gone really, really well. And I do credit Officer Molaski, Chief Kurz, Dr. Morse, Oyster River's staff, faculty, the new principal, with their communication skills, their ability to think these things through, ask the right questions, and then take action based upon that. And your kids are in really good hands. I did have a chance to come in and talk to the students of Oyster River, and I'm assuming that maybe some of your students relayed some of the messages that I had, but just so that there isn't any miscommunication, you can ask me if I leave anything out. But just roughly what I spoke to them about was that the issue with the threats are on multiple levels, but one of the biggest things is that it's a crime. And what I would hate to have happen is for any one of the students here to be wrapped up in a crime. Even if they're not the the age where you can be prosecuted as an adult, to even have to go through a juvenile process or something like that would not be something that anybody would want to go through. There's some certain practical realities to all of these things. I mean, if a student was caught and under all kinds of different circumstances, I'm certain that local prosecutors and all that would do their best to actually help this person out. But at the end of the day, the bad end of this is that it could be a felony. And those things, if they are an adult, those things could be stapled onto college applications and job applications. They can kind of haunt and follow them for a really long time. So even though most of the students here are probably, juveniles, or of that age where they would be treated through the juvenile system, is really trying to convey that message that they're old enough now to know the difference between right and wrong, and they should be old enough to understand that the consequences of that can be pretty dire. So that was sort of the Jeff to them, the adult conversation about, think about what you're doing and why you're doing it. Aside from that, it's just the inconvenience of it. I mean, let's just talk about it for a moment. We're dedicating an awful lot of resources to having to respond to this. A lot of time and effort's being taken up where they should be in school and they should be learning. And they shouldn't be inconvenienced. And the staff and faculty shouldn't have to be wrapped up into it. And we certainly shouldn't be having to bring state resources and local resources in the form of extra police officers and potentially firefighters and all of that here. If there is an evacuation and we're moving students from here to the middle school or elsewhere, there's impacts there. Now another school is being impacted. And just trying to get them to understand that it really impacts a lot, and the consequences of that, they could be dire. I mean, there's economic impacts. And just then there's sort of like the what if, what if there was a real emergency, okay? Presumptively, we know that no bomb ever went off here in Durham, right? Hopefully everybody knows that now, right? It was a threat, but nothing actually happened. So what if there was a real emergency elsewhere in the state, and we had all of these resources and effort happening here at Oyster River, and as it turns out, somebody got hurt elsewhere, and those resources would have been better served there. Now you have that on your conscience. Just trying to impress upon them the issues and concerns that they really should have, the personal responsibility that they need to take. And then I kind of further sort of impressed upon them that, if the students are aware of who might be doing this or who might be wrapped up into this, to try to consider some alternate thinking that's sort of unconventional for teenagers. Nobody wants to be a rat, and everybody kind of understands that. The kids don't want to, talk about each other and give anybody up. But at the end of the day, one of the reasons why sometimes these things happen is it's some form of a cry for help. There's something else going on. And so that maybe by seeing something and saying something, or if you hear something and saying something, you might actually be helping that fellow student out from getting themselves into trouble, okay, for one, and then potentially from maybe getting the help that they're actually asking for, but they're just doing it in a misguided way. So that was sort of fundamentally the conversation that we had with the students. Hopefully that's what they reflected to you folks at home. On the tactical level, as far as our responses to the schools, just so you have sort of an understanding as to how we fit into that, is we do provide training and guidance to the school districts when asked to, and then during the events we can provide a response in the form of sort of enhanced searching. We do that primarily through explosive detection K-9 teams, and we did that 3 times in the last several months here at Oyster River. And that's always done at the request of the local police department. So generally what happens is a threat is detected in whatever form it comes in, be it telephonic, written, email, electronic, verbal, however. And then sort of a threat assessment gets conducted. And from there's a menu of actions that a school district and the local police department can take to make different decisions. And if there's any decision that's made with respect to searching, an extra asset that they have at their disposal is to ask us to come with our K-9 teams, and we'll use those K-9 teams to enhance the search. It's not a requirement. It's not the only way to do this. There is a lot of different ways to approach these things, and really there's no one-size-fits-all solution. I can tell you that there are school districts in New Hampshire that take what I refer to as a strict liability approach. is that we're always going to err on the side of 100% safety. As soon as there's a threat, they evacuate the school, send the kids home, and they don't open school until the next day or several days later after the school's been thoroughly searched, and they don't really put any effort into the threat assessment side of it. And there's challenges with taking that. I think we can probably all agree that that would be the most safe, right? But it would also be most safe if none of you came here today and you just stayed home, right? Because there was risk associated when you left your house and you got in your cars and you came here to Oyster River. We just can't live like that. It's not realistic, and quite frankly, it's not necessary. Threat assessment is key. And that's why sometimes, and this is the part where I think probably Dr. Morris wants me to kind of get into, you've probably seen that with every single one of these, it might appear that it was handled somewhat differently than the one before, okay? That's good, okay? That means that the folks up here are doing their jobs, because every single time you deal with this, there's a myriad of things that have to be dealt with all at the same time, and they all might lead in a somewhat different direction, but have the same outcome, and that's safety. And that's safety. And it's safety, it's measured safety, okay? We want to have a measured response. We can all agree that it is always better to do something than nothing, okay? That, I hope we can agree on that. It's always better to do something than nothing, but what is that something? And that's where there's varying levels. And where I think it probably gets difficult for parents, and I'm a parent of a high school student, so I do understand this on the other end, is the messaging sometimes can be challenging, because when you don't know, your mind goes a million different directions, and assumptions can be made and conclusions can be drawn that just aren't accurate. It's just making sure that whatever those measured things are results in that safe outcome, and that's what's been happening here. Hopefully I'm making some sense. I know when we get to the question and answer time, there'll be some questions thrown at me. And that's what's been going on here. The challenge is that from an outsider looking in, every single time it might look a little bit different. It's not the same as like a fire alarm. Like those all kind of look the same, right? The fire alarm goes off, everybody knows how they have to evacuate, they stage in a certain place, fire truck shows up, they resolve the alarm, and everybody goes back to school. Looks the same way every single time. There's other issues at play here. The most of which is we have to consider the motivation for the threat in the first place. Now, this is sort of the piece of information that I didn't necessarily talk directly to the students about, but it's okay to talk about openly. Is one thing we probably should have to understand about this is that in history, okay, in history, the amount of bombings that have actually occurred after somebody has warned you, has conveyed a threat, is really small. It's not that it's never happened. That's why we have to take them all seriously. It's always better to do something than nothing. But it's a very, very small number. That number is even further reduced with respect to schools in the United States. It's not that it's never happened. It can happen, but it's really, really small. Here's the reality, folks. This is the adult conversation that we have to have, is in the history of the world, if somebody's going to bomb you, they just do it. They don't warn you ahead of time, all right? So keeping that in mind, understand from folks on our side of this decision-making tree, we're not minimizing this at all. We're recognizing that there could be a risk here, but statistically, we have to consider that. So then what's the motivation? Why do it? Why make the threat? Typically, it's disruption. That's the motivation. They're trying to disrupt the school day for some reason. And that's where it gets a little murky as to what the reason is. It could be thrill. It could be I didn't do my homework. I don't want to have to pass it in the next period. It could be the tests that I don't feel like I'm studying. It could be any myriad of things. It could be we're coming into the spring now. It could be it's a warm day. And I know when they evacuate us, they send us out to the fields. It could be that simple. It could be a cry for help. The point is we don't know. The point is that the threat may not be to actually bomb the school. So those things have to be considered. And the challenge is if disruption is the ultimate motivation, the more disruption there is, the more we're feeding into it. So there's a balance that needs to be struck. Your kid's safety comes first. Absolutely, all day long. but our response to it needs to be measured. Doing something is better than doing nothing. Hopefully that makes some sense. Awesome. Dr. Lewis?
Thank you, Sergeant. I think it's important that we hear from our local police chief as well, Chief Kurtz.
He's a difficult person to follow. He certainly has a lot of knowledge, and that's why you can see why we call the state police. The Durham Police Department, although it's a full-service agency, we do not have a dog. We don't have specializing in bomb threats. It's something that rarely happens here, as the sergeant pointed out. That doesn't mean that we don't have policy on it and procedures to follow. We know how to do that. And those are the things that are engaged the minute we get the call. One of the things I want to say throughout this is that there's never, ever a question of the fact that we are never going to put your kids in risk, period. That is the primary goal of why we're working together. Even the idea, if you will, when I was a kid of having police in school was just not even on my radar. And here we are today with police in school. And it's a good thing in the way that we can now do it. And we can also identify people who have gone into bathrooms or in various areas of the school. When this occurs, we generally know we're looking at somebody who did this, because there's hardly any place in the public areas of the school that are not videotaped. So our ability to do the investigation, which is our primary response, is ongoing, and we'll be relentless in the pursuit of that. That being said, when we have the discussions, when the bomb threats come in, we obviously assess what kind of a situation is that occurred, some of the nuances that make sense to us as police officers and investigators, and then others that don't make sense. And I think there's a sense initially that whoever's doing this, it is for disruption clearly, but there's something else going on here, as the sergeant indicated. And that's our primary goal, is to cease that behavior and then get help for whatever it is that's going on, that's percolating in the background. So that really is our primary. But again, I want to make sure that, that there's never any question in your mind that we are thinking primarily and almost exclusively of the safety of your children. Now, everything will be different depending on what we see and how we see it. And it's difficult where to a certain extent, I'm saying, trust our decision-making. With that caveat said, know that we are making a decision based on the safety of your children, based on what we're seeing as police officers, based on our experiences to bring in the state police. But as he said, this brings in a lot of resources. I know one time, I think the dog that was coming down was in Lancaster. That's a hike. And they came down very quickly to give us a hand in Durham. And another time, we were lucky there was training that was going on in Concord with the dogs, so we had 4 dogs within 20 minutes or so. It was great. So other times it may be a little different. We might have to do things where we send kids to the middle school, where we do a lockdown, where we do other things that we're creatively thinking about that ensures the safety, but yet one of the things that we have to think about, as administrators of the school, is that, some of these things have a copycat scenario that goes on and on and on. And even as much as being as transparent as we possibly can, which is our goal here tonight, has some negative impact, possibly. But it's still important to be as transparent and talk to you and answer your questions as best we can. And again, know that the bottom line safety is the kids, which we never will gamble with.
Thank you, Chief. And I've asked our principal to speak to you from her perspective. So, Suzanne?
Thank you. So I just want to take a few minutes to talk a little bit about it from the school administrator's perspective. And I'm not going to repeat a lot of what's already been said, but we do have a process that we use. We immediately, when we're notified which usually comes to the administrators, and we work simultaneously on a lot of different levels. Things happen very, very, very quickly. We're connecting with police and other law enforcement. We're connecting as an administrative team. We're connecting with the SAU. We're connecting with the middle school. So there are a lot of people that are involved with this. And sometimes the notification to families is delayed because of that, because our primary concern is to make sure that the kids and the faculty and other people within the building are safe. So once we've established that, we've established our plan, we've established the steps that we're going to take, then at that point, we have a little bit of breathing room and we can get notification out as soon as possible to families. The other piece that I want to talk a little bit about is our choice. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of energy, and it continues, so we're not done. So the work of the administrative team in the school and the district and the police, we're still not done through the process. So after all of this occurs, we need to work within the school, and we have the school line of the investigation and all of the different pieces, the educational piece, which we started before vacation and will continue with students and faculty, and then the disciplinary and all of those other pieces on the school side, and then the police will have their investigation and have and the pieces that go with that. And we're working together, we're collaborating. Officer Molaski works very, very closely with us, and we're very fortunate to have her working with us on this. But I do want to say that this is something that does, and many people have reached out to me and they've said, we know this is taking a lot of time, we know that and the kids come to me and they tell me all the time. We had them do a little write-up in advisory. We asked all the students to sit down and take a little bit of time just to write down their thoughts and their feelings about how they're dealing with all of this and what are they feeling and what do they want to tell us. And a lot of them are saying the same things that the adults are saying. We want to get back to school. We want to come to school. We don't want to have to think about this. We want this to end. And so they, as a collective group, they feel the same way that the adults do. And I think that was an important piece to talk to them about how they're feeling. And that also allowed us to have conversations with them about small changes that we have to make for probably a short period of time now about procedures and policies that we have within the school. There's some bathrooms that are currently locked. There's reasons behind that, and I think the kids understand that because we've engaged them in those conversations. There's a sign-out process that we're using right now in classrooms to go to the bathroom. Again, I think the kids understand that. This is short, temporary. It's what we need to do at this time just to ensure safety and to be able to follow up on some of the things we need to do.
Thank you, Suzanne. So you've got a broad sense and then you've got an immediate sense of how we've been dealing with the bomb scares. I also want to share with you that we don't walk into these issues unprepared. State law requires us to have emergency preparedness plans. We do. We review these every year in the summer as an administrative team. We make modifications as new information is shared. They're reviewed by the police department to make sure they make sense. And then ultimately, they're our working document. This is a document that doesn't get published on our webpage because it provides internal information about how we would respond in the case of an emergency. So where we are as a school system, as a community, is very likely where you are as parents. We're incredibly frustrated. We view every one of these incidents, as the sergeant has alluded to, as the chief has alluded to, as serious incidents, but the level of response that we give to each incident is really based on the circumstance we're in. So we have sent the kids home. That happened before Christmas. We have sent the children to the middle school while we investigated the high school, and we have kept them in the building in a lockdown. So what contributes to the different actions? The immediacy of the state police is part of that. The local police department through Holly, the deputy chief, and the chief, giving us their sense of how serious the threat is from their professional judgment, and then ultimately how quickly we can respond. So the very first incident before Christmas, Unfortunately, I was shared Facebook communication among parents. And I say unfortunately because the Facebook communication, I'm not a big social media fan because, people say what they feel like saying and there's really no accountability what's being said. So in one group it was, why is the school taking so long to communicate with us? And the other group was, I think they're more engaged in making sure our children are safe and then they'll communicate with us. So I just want you to know, based on what you've heard tonight, what I want you to know from me as superintendent, our first response in every one of these instances is, what's the best approach to ensure that your children, our students, are as safe as they can be? The first time we did this before Christmas, again, there's been no history in this district of ever having to deal with this. It took us just about an hour to communicate with the parents that we were sending the kids home because we had a bomb scare. Unfortunately, with time, we get better at communicating. So the next time it took us about a half an hour. And every time one of these incidences occur, we sit down as an administrative team and say, what could we be doing more effectively? And communication is always at the top of our agenda. And currently, we're in the process of, sadly, creating canned communication responses. There's a lockdown at the high school, there's a bomb scare. So we can communicate more quickly with you. The issue is, of course, there's 760 cell phones in students' possessions, and there's 100 cell phones in adult possessions, and I will never be able to beat them in communicating with you, no matter how hard I try. But I want you to know that the second thing beyond keeping your children and our faculty safe is communicating with you. And we've been diligently working on that issue as well. So I guess we're at the place where I just would want to say, I'm super frustrated as a superintendent that our children's education is being disrupted. I'm very concerned because the vast majority of our students, and I will let you know that both the assistant superintendent and myself are in this building on each occasion. And when we brought kids back from the middle school, I stood in the foyer where they all had to pass me. So I could see, get a sense of how they're feeling. And, the vast majority of your children have handled this magnificently. But there's always a small group of kids, because of who they are as human beings, where any kind of fire drill or bomb threat like this is very disruptive. And the counseling staff at the high school, who know your children well, reach out to those kids and they bring them in and they touch base with them. But if you find that we're not reaching out to your child because your child is not somebody that we know is somebody who gets anxious, please call the counseling office. Our counseling office will have your child in there and talking to them post-haste. I think that's where I'll stop. We have excellent presenters. We have a lot of knowledge at the table, and we'd be glad to answer your questions. I do want to encourage you to go to the microphone. Hollering from the back of the room won't get picked up on the tape. There are people in this room who have questions that 100 people would have questions on who couldn't make it tonight. So your questions are important to us. As we answer them, we're not just answering you, we're answering a community. So we would invite you to the microphone if you have a question.
Hello, my name is Terry Harrington. I am a mother of 4 in the school district, and I'll also preface this by saying I'm a felony-level criminal prosecutor. So the first thing that I want to just throw out there that I am hearing is that the message to the students that whoever is engaged in this behavior is engaging in felony level criminal activity. And I am very sensitive to why someone would be doing that, and I understand that we're looking at why motivation as a cry for help. That would be at the other end of after figuring it out. Because quite frankly, as a mom with 4 sons, I hear what these kids are talking about, so I'll let you all know. They're not taking it particularly seriously. And I've had a couple of conversations where, yeah, they understand, oh, well, you know, if they're a juvenile, they might not really get into that much trouble. However, they scare a lot of people, especially in an environment where we just had a bombing in Boston, how many years ago? And that they need to understand that there are consequences. And there are a lot of kids that I have seen that don't really take stock in that. So I would like to know what the message is on the other end. It's not all about, you know, gee, Johnny's having some trouble, so we need to be, no, we need to let them know that this is absolutely unacceptable and it is going to be followed through and that there are real consequences. Because the copycatting, I think, is being driven by this thinking that some of them don't really get that what they're doing is really bad. So thank you.
Thank you. For our end of it, the school board has policies and procedures related to discipline. This could be an expellable offense. What that means in New Hampshire is the school board has the authority to place a student out of their academic setting for an indefinite period. The student and their family would have to petition to re-enter. So on the legal end, the extreme is felony. On the school end, it's expulsion. So that's the extreme of both of these circumstances. And then there's, you know, any range of choices between suspension, long-term suspension, and then ultimately expulsion. So all of those are on the table because the board has a policy and procedures that they apply to. Other questions? The sergeant did a great job communicating that with the kids. He was very straightforward and clear with his messaging.
Right, good evening. My name is Adam Downey. I just want to follow up with young lady's question over there, and to have a question about one of your comments, the possibility of expulsion. Now, I'm a Southern man and a military man, or a former, so it was always black and white with us. If you did A, this was your consequence. It wasn't a range. It was, this is what you did. This is what's going to happen to you.
Yeah.
It should be spelled out. As no, in my personal opinion, it shouldn't be arranged, especially for this level of sincerity or of extremity with the bomb threat. I don't think there should be ranges. My opinion, of course. Second thing is, after having these 2 occurrences, have any gaps been identified in how we can respond better, either as a school administration or as a law enforcement? Meaning, like I said, the first time it happened, we had to get a K-9 unit down from Lancaster. Now, I'm not sure about the resources, what are available. I mean, is it better to have K-9 units in certain areas in New Hampshire already pre-staged? I don't know. It might be a better question for you, but Sergeant. But I just want to ask the question: to have our gaps identified, and what are we doing as a school district, as a community, as a law enforcement to try to bridge those gaps? Thank you.
Okay, excellent comments, excellent questions. So I'm not in a position, obviously, to answer quite all of those on a Durham-specific level. But on a statewide level, we're obviously always, reviewing our response posture and how we can better serve the state. What I can tell you is that assets such as this are finite. It's a limited resource, and there are myriads of reasons that can dictate that. And unfortunately, this is what I can tell you. We are not in a position to have 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, these kind of assets on duty pre-staged at different locations in the state to always be able to provide the optimum time to minimize convenience. That being said, what I can tell you is we do have the adequate resources, and we do have them spread about the state to provide an appropriate response to ensure safety. The challenge there is that those are sometimes two different things. Like I spoke about before, safety sometimes does conflict just a little bit with convenience or minimizing the disruption. And there's the balancing act, isn't it? You know, sometimes we do have to wait a little bit. We end up running into a little bit more disruption, and that, quite frankly, is not something that anybody wants, but we're going to err on that side of safety in that circumstance. I hope that addressed the question in the way you asked.
And the answer on the policy. So I could have said, we'll expel the child. I would be answering that question poorly if I said that. The policy that the board sets forth are the policies that administratively follow. And to say that the ultimate punishment would be expulsion is true. What ultimately happens is going to depend on the circumstances of that child in terms of intent. You know, if a child is identified who's maliciously set up to disrupt the school, then the board would get a recommendation from me that would be at the extreme end. If we find out that the child who's making this, we'll say, is emotionally disturbed, then the punishment might be that lengthy out-of-school suspension while they receive treatment for that disturbance. So when I say there's a range of options, I don't want you to think it's a slap on the hand. There's never a slap on the hand. It's trying to match the punishment with the circumstance. Much like the measured response on bomb scares, you would want us as administrators to consider all the factors in terms of what disciplinary procedure and how far up that procedure we go. The truthful answer is the ultimate is expulsion. So I didn't want to, come out looking like John Wayne and, give you an answer that would make you feel like, okay, this guy's got it under control. We have policies and procedures just like we have laws, and the board makes those policies and procedures. Administration is responsible for implementing them, and we are incredibly frustrated by this circumstance, and we will address it using the board's policies and procedures that make sense when we end up with the culprit, if we end up with the culprit. The truth is that Suzanne's staff is spending an inordinate amount of time investigating, and so far we have come up with no one. The one before Christmas we were able to identify, and we put together a disciplinary plan that the board supported for that child. So we use the procedures that the board approves, and the board has as one of its procedures expulsion. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Patty Hodge, and I have 2 boys in the high school, and I have 2 questions. The first is, it sounds like you are all quite convinced that this is a student who has made these threats and not some type of external threat from an adult or somebody unrelated to the school, perhaps. Is that correct? We can assume that this really is a student making...
These threats did not occur from outside sources. So we are assuming that it's a student. Quite frankly, I guess it's an assumption that we could say anybody in this building, adult or student, but we suspect that it's a student.
Okay. And the second question is, you just mentioned that the first event, you do know who perpetrated that. And I understand there must be, you know, some significant confidentiality issues surrounding that, but are you able to disseminate to the students at least what the punishment was, not who did the crime, but what the punishment for that crime was? Is that possible? Because maybe they would, you know, if they heard, okay, this really happened to one of our fellow students, maybe that would, you know, stop
Sure.
additional copycats.
We're not able to share punishments of students with other students and with other families. Each child in each family is addressed individually, and so it's not something that we can disseminate, and that's based on federal law for protecting your child and your family, or any child or any family's confidentiality.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Mike Lilly. I live in Madbury. I have a daughter who's a freshman at the high school. Along those lines, I have to question the deterrent effect of the consequences that the first perpetrator experienced. First of all, I understand that, you know, you have to handle this in-house. Are there still potential criminal consequences to that person?
Yeah, yeah.
And
Again, remember the conversation is, there's legal issues and there's school issues.
Mhm.
Sometimes they overlap, sometimes they don't. And in a circumstance like this, there's parallel tracks.
You know, because most of the kids know, you know, who the perpetrator was, and that person is, you know, walking around the school. Parent lack of consequences because of the confidentiality. Expulsion would be a more obvious consequence, and I would ask you to consider that when future perpetrators are found, to include not only the effect on that student, but the deterrent effect on other students as well.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Hi, Mary Cobb. I have a middle schooler, a high schooler, and a current staff member at the high school, 3 boys. My concern is, I understand when you mention that typically someone's not going to warn us that they're going to do a bomb. Honestly, the Friday before vacation, I didn't want to send my children because I was afraid that someone who's doing this isn't necessarily looking to put a bomb, but they're testing the waters. They're building their confidence. Not necessarily to do a
Did I get
bomb.
the email from you?
No.
Oh, because I got an email very much like this.
So my concern is that they're testing the waters, they're building their confidence, not to do a bomb, but perhaps to do another action that's going to be just as awful. So how do you balance that? Because as a parent, I get the call for help, I get being empathetic. At the end of the day, that doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is that my 3 boys come home safe. And so how are you able to decipher that this isn't someone who's trying to build their confidence?
So I'll take a quick shot and then I'll turn it over to the police officers. One of the things the sergeant told you in his presentation is each reaction that we have had has been, for the 3 occurrences, different. And so if somebody's trying to test the waters, what they're looking for is for us to be predictable. And so if we absolutely, every single time, move the kids down to the middle school, they'd see that pattern.
Okay.
If we absolutely, every single time, lock the kids down in their classroom, they would know where the kids were. If we absolutely, every single time, moved the kids out on a bus and then left the school. So each reaction, though, as the sergeant was saying, looks different, it's purposeful.
Okay.
There's rationale behind it. If you can't predict, then, you know, we're less of a target. But I would turn it over to either the sergeant or the chief.
You should know that every incident that we respond to, we critique it afterwards. And we really had an excellent email from someone who...
Oh, that would have been mine. No.
That's why I said it that way. But we really had an excellent email from someone who talked about that very thing. And I'd love to stand here and say that that's exactly what we were thinking. We were not. You know, we're a full-service police department that tries hard to prevent things, to provide services, and like I said, to worry about your children foremost when we're dealing with these things. But that thought came up after this email, and we started thinking about that. Well, okay, so what other high liability issues do we have in Durham? Is someone testing to see our reaction? And as we pointed out, we try to do things differently so that we're not being predictable. And if your kids have not dealt with the same thing yet in the 3 instances we've had. So we're thinking about that, but then again, you know, it's a difficult one. It's not almost possible to lock down. You know, there isn't anyone in this room that probably hasn't gone through TSA lines and been frustrated. Well, welcome to our new world. And is that where we're heading? You know, that's not what we want to talk about. And we can certainly make everything very safe, but we want to make sure that you understand that we know through our investigation. I have 3 officers that are working on this, and well, no secrets. There's video cameras. We've talked to the person who's done it. We've just now got to figure out how to prove it. And the preponderance of evidence is high for us. And while it would be nice, you know, there's a gentleman who told me one time, Chief, what we need with these UNH students is a good public execution. I get what he's talking about, but that's not where we're going. And it might teach them a lesson, but it's kind of permanent. So, you know, we try not to, with kids and juveniles, the truth of the matter is that how many children that we know of that are in high school are fully developed that don't have an implication of what they're doing? So we're going to present it in that direction. We're going to pursue it as a felony. That's because that's our job. What happens from that perspective in a juvenile court system is significantly different than an adult court system. Many of you who may have been here in 1999, I believe it was, did anyone remember the fire we had at the high school? That was a long time ago. And that was exactly what was going on there, is that there was some kids that were going out with some girls here at Oyster River, and they wanted to get them out of school, and the bomb threat wasn't working, and so they lit the school on fire one night. And they did 8 to 12 years in New Hampshire State Prison after we solved that they were from Kittery, Maine. So we pay attention, but sadly we're in significant mode of reaction. We were hoping that some of the discussion that the sergeant was able to convey to your children was meaningful to them and made sense, and that they too would say, you know, we've been whispered in the ear. Holly's here in the school and people talk to her, and we have a pretty good idea what's going on, but we don't play guessing games as police officers, so we have to be definitive. And that's where we're going. And when we're at that juncture, we will make that arrest.
Thank you. Thanks.
Jim, can I just say something here? Sure. I just want to speak very quickly about just piggybacking a little bit on that. We spend time at the high school doing drills, right? So everybody's been involved with fire drills. We have to do a certain number, and we've all been a part of that all through our educational careers. We also engage faculty and students in a variety of different evacuations. We do the Alice drill. We did that earlier this year. Lockdowns, shelter in place. There are a variety of different things that faculty, administrators, faculty go through training. We have conversations, and so we, prior to the evacuation to the middle school, we had already done an evacuation drill. So the kids already knew where they were going. We already had a structure in place to be able to take attendance and do all these things. The middle school, we had already gone to the middle school. And so when we called Jay and we said we're gonna evacuate to the middle school, the middle school was right on top of it. They knew exactly what our plan was, where we were going to go, and how we were going. So I just want to put that piece out too, to put people's minds at ease that, you know, the middle school and the high school, our proximity is wonderful. We work collaboratively together, and we do practice some of these things ahead of time, unfortunately.
I want to go back to a question I heard earlier about, you know, one of the things that we learned, I think was your question, was to make sure that the middle school and high school, whichever building was threatened, both buildings were locked down. That was one of the learning things we did from the very first event. The event was located at the high school. The other thing is the communication goes broadly across the district. Initially, when we were dealing with emergencies, we were directing the communication to the families of that building. And the fact is that it's a small district, and you know, if you have a sibling at Massway or a sibling at Moheramet or a sibling at the middle school and the issues at the high school, we learned that we needed to communicate 100% to our parent and guardian group. So in any of these call out that you get from my office, it's hitting over 9,000 devices. You know, we're hitting cell phones, we're hitting computers, we're hitting texts, and that was the other thing that we learned from the first one, that our emergency response software had text capability that we had never activated. And so that was another change. And so we had sent out to all of you, do you want to receive text? And I think a lot of parents and guardians wanted the text because they weren't seeing the email. I mean, that was one of the concerns that was expressed to me from parents. And the first issue is, you know, it's really great that you sent out that email, but I'm at work. I didn't see it until I got home that night. And my kids were already home, and I had no clue what was going on. And so by adding text, we are able to communicate more effectively. So those are three things that we've changed substantially in our procedures to make a difference in terms of our ability to reach out to all of you. Thank you. Please.
Hi, my name's Liz Bolio. I have 2 boys in the high school. I'm kind of changing the tables here. I honestly think the communication's been excellent. I think you're doing a great job. I want to know what we can do as parents. What are we supposed to do to help you?
This is a great question. And just before the holidays, you know, one of my last closing statements on the communication that I was writing at 2:15 on a Friday before vacation, and as I'm writing it, I get word from the high school and middle school that they had, you know, a writing on the bathroom wall saying bomb. And so that was my last statement as I was closing before vacation, because I wanted to close communication with all of you. And they said, you know, the one fundamental thing that all parents and guardians can do is talk to their teenager about this. It's all well and good we have the sergeant. They don't know the sergeant, but he did a great job. It's all well and good we have Holly Molaski. They know Holly, but she's not mom. And it's all well and good that we have the principals and the administrative staff and the teachers we do, but they're not mom and dad or the guardian. And so I think the number one thing that all of our community can do is sit down with our teenagers and have the conversation about how disruptive this is. And, you know, we have a way for teenagers to talk to us without them ever actually sitting down with a grown-up. The kids have access to an anonymous box electronically, quick tip, and we have no idea who it comes from, and we look at that diligently, hoping that, you know, there is a teenager who knows the teenager who likely did this, and of course, you know, none of us want to be the person who tattles or rats on another person. But for us to get to the bottom of this, we need to have, you know, names. And so that tool is available to all of your children. It's available to all of you. Perhaps your teenager says to you, this is, you know, who I think. Doesn't mean that they know. and they say, but I'm not touching that. As a parent or a guardian, you can. It's accessible to you. So I think that's the number one thing. This is, a huge issue for our community. It's a disruptive issue for the education of our kids. And we need the collective voice. We need someone to be the person who confirms to Holly or Suzanne that I know who did it, or I think I know who did it. And just, by accusing someone or dropping that in there, it doesn't mean that Suzanne's going to accept that as gospel, or Holly Malassi is going to accept that as gospel. They're going to do their due diligence like they do on every issue. And they're going to give every kid the benefit of the doubt. They'll investigate it. We've had a number of tips that have led nowhere. We don't go after kids willy-nilly, kind of like the chief. We have to have creditable evidence. I just can't go out and blame the kid who's the troublemaker. I mean, it may not even be that kid. It could be, the star athlete. We don't know. It could be the valedictorian. I mean, we really are struggling with this issue because we're not getting a lot of really good information, and I don't want to say that we haven't narrowed it down. We think we have, but we don't know. And so the biggest thing that you can do as parents and guardians to help us is have conversations with your children and encourage them to share, if not with us, then with you, and then you can share with us. Sergeant, is there anything else parents can do, or Chief, that would be helpful beyond that? I mean, that's really the key. So thank you. Thank you for the question.
Hi everybody, my name is Sarah Northrup. I have an 8th grader that comes to the high school for 1 class per day. I just want to thank all of you because you're being really candid, and I appreciate your time and your effort. And I also want to thank all the parents that are here, because most likely you're not the parents of the children that are doing this. So most likely you're the ones having the conversations already with your kids, and you're going to keep having them. But to that point, I support your nuanced approach to this, because we don't know who that kid is, and that kid could have a psychological problem. That kid could just be causing trouble. We don't know, but as a community, we need to support the idea that children are still developing and they can make mistakes. Nobody's been hurt yet, and we want to prevent people from getting hurt. The community can enter the school at any time after hours. The doors are not locked. A community member could be doing this, and a child that's expelled from the school and their lives are, I don't know, in my mind, pretty much ruined once you get expelled, they could come in and enter the school and create havoc as well. So I really feel like we as a community need to support this nuanced approach and trust that it will work for us. I have a few more points. So I have an idea for what might help, something else that could happen within the school, and it's taken from the field of behavioral economics and the field of cheating and students that cheat. So we know that cheating is rampant, it's aberrant behavior, and how do we reverse that? Something that's been very successful is for students to create a social contract with each other. And it's student-driven, and they form a task force where there's some leaders that help to hear the voices of their fellow students, and they generate a contract. There's an assembly, there are meetings, there are regular meetings throughout the year, and they have to sign the contract. And it's only enacted when all the students sign it. And it's really important for them to make the contract with each other, because, like you said, no child wants to be a rat to an adult, but they will rat on each other if they're violating their own contract. Okay, so that's one idea. And I think that as a community, we can also support the children in, I don't know, maybe providing mentors. Maybe we as a community need to form a mentor task force where we are connecting with high schoolers that may need some extra support from us, like a big brother, big sister type of situation. I don't know. But I'm willing to do that because I don't want to be the next Sandy Hook. I don't want to be the next Columbine. And the other thing we can do is to look at Sandy Hook. They've provided 24/7 counseling to their students. At all times, they can access a counselor. And that's one thing, but I think we need to look at other models from other places and make sure that we're following best practices And I know it's a funding issue, but I'm pretty sure as a community, if we see a best practice and a model, we can come up with funds to help make it work. But I don't want to just look internally. I want to make sure that we're all looking externally for best practice models to follow. The last thing is, I appreciate everything you guys are doing, but I also feel like I'm not really being given all the information that's possible. I realize there are confidentiality issues, but it was just brought out that you think you know who the student is based on video evidence, but I just learned that tonight, and I didn't know that. It wasn't put out in an email, and I just wonder, what other information am I lacking? What am I missing? And I don't even feel like I have a full idea. You know, just talking with other parents, there are other rumors coming around, and I don't know. So is there another way for us to get information, or is there
Sure.
some kind of
The
updates?
best way of getting information is directly email either myself or Suzanne, because really, I mean, her administrative staff, obviously, but in terms of being the principal, the superintendent, the easiest way to deal with rumors is just to ask the question.
Mm-hmm.
And so often, you know, that was what I was getting at in social media. So often, it just takes off on its own. And at one point, I had said, if you ever need clarification on any issue, feel free to call me or send me an email. And that's true for Suzanne as well. The information that we give you is what we feel like we can share at any given point in time. And so tonight, we felt comfortable saying that. Prior to tonight, we haven't felt comfortable saying that. So the amount of information we feel like we can share is really contingent on, on the time we are at any given moment. So I think that, you know, people are starving for information, and yet we can only give them what we can give them at a given time. We're not keeping anything back other than to protect students. Other than that, what you're hearing tonight is everything we know at this given point in time.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. No problem. Holly?
So I just want to add to that. I know it's really frustrating for you parents to sit right here and just to kind of follow up with what we already talked about as what you as parents can do and what we can try to do here to not only identify the students that have committed these acts, but to deter it in the future. And I know one thing that's very frustrating right now is the lack of information that parents and students are feeling. Unfortunately, currently I have 4 separate investigations that I'm conducting, 4 separate incidents in 4 separate locations. So as much as I would like to be able to stand here in front of you all tonight and tell you that we have closure, that this is what happened, that these are the facts, and this is the end result, we don't have that. Just when I feel like I'm getting ahead with numerous interviews with staff, with students, working alongside with the administrative team, you know, another issue has happened, another incident happened, as well as the other day-to-day routines. So it's not that we don't want to share, it's not that we eventually can't share, but the other piece of this too is that Sergeant Dave brought this up in his investigation when a student asked, you know, well, what decides what level threat this something might be. I can't obviously stand here right now and give away some of our investigatory techniques or tactics that we use to try to determine who's done this, identify them, and how we're going to move forward. So I know we're asking you folks to give us a lot of information, and it feels frustrating to sit there and not hear just as much information back. It doesn't mean that we're not, we don't think of that. We discuss that almost on a daily basis as an administrative team, is at what point or where are we right now. But as parents, what we really need you guys to do is that I know for a fact that I've sat across from the table. I think we've probably interviewed upwards of 25 to maybe 30 kids, and this is just the 3 threats last week. And obviously we determined who used the restroom. We're very fortunate that we have custodial staff who cleans the restrooms, who cleans the hallways, who cleans the cafeteria. So I know for a fact that I've spoken with the individuals who have conducted this, but I need the support from the families, from the students, and from the peers. Because they're the ones that are out there day to day. I can walk through the halls, I can hang on the lunchroom. They see us coming, of course they're gonna stop their conversation short in their tracks. You guys are the ones that are hopefully listening at the dinner tables and reviewing their social media and having these candid conversations with them. And we're not going to identify the person who did it until we either have an admission, which is highly unlikely, or we have somebody who can come forward and help us.
Thanks.
The only thing I'd add to Holly's comments is she also gets frustrated with me and the chief, because sometimes we say things that she wishes we wouldn't say. So sometimes we get a little ahead of her in terms of her investigation and what we think we can communicate. She's very good at letting us know when we've stepped over the proverbial communication boundary, and I'm sure it takes a lot of courage, certainly, to say it to her boss, but she said it to me too. He said, "Who said this?" I did. "Please don't do that again." So she was very professional, but she was right, and I accept that. So in our efforts to communicate, sometimes we become overzealous. And so it's good to have people like Holly on the team who says, you need to back it off a little bit because it's going to interfere with my investigation. I liked a number of your ideas. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tracy Beauchamp. I have 2 children in the high school. Ever since I got I think it was the first or the second email stating a low level, and I know, Officer Malasky, you just said that you're not allowed to tell us what determines a level. But my question is, who determines what level bomb threat or scare it is? And how is that determined? How does that differentiate?
Sure.
So phone calls, letters, stuff like that.
I'm going to also bring the sergeant up again on this particular issue because he gave us a set of protocols in the very first time this went through that helped us differentiate. One of those Facebook comments was, what does low level mean? Does it mean that you're partially pregnant? And, it was one of those sarcastic digs at, well, what does that mean? What it means is I don't believe it. And there's a set of criteria that police officers use, and I've had Homeland Security training personally, and so I understand, what a significant threat is and what a low-level threat is. Going back to what the sergeant said, in terms of every threat we have to take seriously, whether we believe it or not is immaterial. All right? So I'm looking at a word that says bomb. So this is not the example. I'm just telling you to give you a sense of it. And doesn't tell me anything. Generally speaking, that's a nonsense threat. How would I react? In one of the ways we've already reacted. There's no situation where a boy calls wolf and we don't react. We will not be ever in the position where we see a perceived threat, whether we perceive it as low or not, and we don't react in the way that you've seen us react, utilizing the local police, utilizing the state police. We do not make that determination alone. We're having informed conversations throughout the incident, and we're trying to make an assessment, and I think that's the word the sergeant used, as to what the threat is. So even though I do not believe it is a real threat, I act as if it is every time. And that's the only way we can go, because we don't know. You're making your best judgment based on a lot of training and a lot of information from the police departments and from my own experience. And so, the idea that we would ignore it is not on the table. And we simply can't. But the intervention level, assessing the threat, is really what we're trying to do. And so the first time this happened, it had not happened before. And so we saw the threat. It may not have been a significant threat. It could have been a low-level threat like the following threats. But we had to act, as if it was real. And so each of the reactions has been measured based on our belief, and each reaction has been always, how do we make sure the students and staff are safe? And then how do we ensure the building is also safe? So move the kids, get them out of the way, either out of the building or home or in a lockdown while we assess the situation. Never in these 3 instances did we ever say, well, let's just keep school because we think it's nonsense. You know, so I'll turn it over to the professionals. Sarge, if you want to take a shot at, he'll tell you right away, he's not going to give you all the answers because he keeps them, you know, in his professional tool chest, but he can give you a better sense of, from my belief, it's low level and how we confirm it to something that he would see as significant.
Great question. Dr. Morse already kind of hit on it, but so what I want to focus on, the part of your question I want to focus on is sort of, you want to know like low, medium, high, how do we come up with that, or what are some of the parameters that go into that? And that's like a class. I mean, that's a level of coursework. So we're not going to get into all of it right here. But you know, at the 30,000 foot level, really what it comes down to is somewhat plausibility. Now, digging down deep, how do we determine that plausibility is where we get into the coursework that would be challenging to do in a forum such as this. But you know, it's no one thing in a silo, and that's what's important, is that I think sometimes how rumors start is that people will grasp onto just like one thing. Oh, just because it was on a bathroom wall, they treated it this way. Well, no. That, quite frankly, may be very well part of it, absolutely. But it's that in combination with other things. The level of specificity, was a date and a time placed there? Did it specify any names? Quite frankly, was the spelling correct? There can be often other context. Is there other behavior going on in the school that might be associated with this? Do we have a list of suspects? If we do, what is the police department's belief that any of those suspects are capable of carrying it out? That's important. So you can just imagine that there's all these different things that come into play. You know, when I say time of day, you know, again, Friday afternoons when it's 60 degrees out in the spring, all right, already motivations, you got to start thinking about that. You know, is this really disruption or not? But you can't do nothing. You know, you still have to do something. But it helps provide the framework for the police, for the school administrative staff, to limit. They have this big menu of options that they can take. And within that menu, it's not like they have to select the right one, okay? They might want to just narrow it down so they have the select few to choose from. Because again, we do want to vary our response. That type of thinking is actually typically not always on the local level. I think about that all the time. Because I do know that people do test us. They want to know how my techs do what they do. So I'm always thinking about, is there a different angle to this? So we want to narrow that menu down to a select few, and then dive into it and pick the one that makes the best sense for the day at hand. I hope that helps. And if it doesn't, let me offer this to you. A year ago now, I believe, or maybe it was last fall, I can't recall, I'm losing track. But New Hampshire, in addition to a vast part of the rest of this country, and in fact it was somewhat international, was getting hammered with what was referred to in the media as a robocall bomb threat. A robocall bomb threat. They were essentially computer-generated calls that would be received at schools communicating a bomb threat. Now the interesting thing about that is that the level of responses was very different all over the place for a short amount of time, and then it became really obvious really quickly that there was a plausibility problem. Is it plausible? Is it really plausible that devices are going to be set in hundreds of schools all over the eastern seaboard, to include the United Kingdom, all set to go off at the same time? Is that plausible? I would convey to you as an adult that it's quite frankly not. I mean, even the most sophisticated organizations in the world, it would be very unlikely that they would be able to pull something like that off. So right there, even though the message, the text alone had a lot of the hallmarks of a medium or even a high-risk threat, the method of delivery made it highly implausible. So it goes from being really high to really low, just like that. And the whole key to that was communication. If Oyster River detects that by notifying the State Fusion Center, the New Hampshire Information Analysis Center, that is seeing these things happen across the world, they can immediately come back and say, okay, yep, that sounds serious. However, just so you know, Chief, this is going on in 100 other schools. So even though the language sounds harsh, sounds specific, sounds like a high credibility threat, there's always other context out there that the first responders and the administrators have that allow them to sometimes go in the other direction. Does that make sense? Does that help?
It does, and I just want to bring up one more point, thank you so much, is that something that I was just thinking when you said this reminded me of the code red, code orange that we had after 9/11. My senior is training to be a police officer. He's scared to go to school. What this tells me is that it's not only do we have to be concerned about a possibility of a bomb, we have to be concerned about these kids being terrified going to school. So I just wanted to share that too. And I hope that the kids are getting the right therapy and counseling that they can. I mean, for my 17, almost 18-year-old who wants to be a police officer is scared to come to school. He hasn't gone to school in 2 days. That says a lot. So.
Thank you very
All right.
much. I'm just gonna, let me just speak to that for just one moment. Thank you. So this goes to the heart of it, all right? I think I spoke earlier on about that strict liability approach. We just send the kids home, and we just stay home and huddle up, and that's what we do. We can't live like that, okay? We can't live like that. Question was posed, what can we do as parents and all that. I'm not an educator. I'm not going to pretend to be. I'm a police officer. I'm a bomb technician by trade. But this, let me just say this. We need to have the courage to live our lives. We need to have the courage to not live in fear, and that's challenging when things like this happen that scare us. So I think that really goes back to some of Dr. Morse's comments about talking to our kids and all that. But what goes on to a good follow-on, I suppose, to sort of the counseling and the therapeutic side of it is also some encouragement. The statistics are that we actually live in a very safe country. We live in one of the safest states. Ladies and gentlemen, you're in one of the safest communities in this state. Don't forget that. Don't forget that. Not over something scribbled on a bathroom wall. Could it happen here? Yep, it could. The likelihood of it's pretty low. Are there people here that are looking out for everybody every single day? Yep. Not just the people that are up here and the organizations that they represent, but your students are all looking out for each other. I'm an outsider, folks. I'm not from Durham. I don't work in Durham on a regular basis. I came in here and I spoke to your high school students, and I'll tell you what I saw is I saw some very frustrated students that are as concerned about this as a lot of you are. I'm sure that there are some that might be being cavalier in their discussions. For some of them, that might be real. For others, it might be bravado. And let's face it, I think I might have mentioned this before in front of the students. I know that some of the folks up here heard me say this. One of the challenges here is to get these kids sometimes to open up to us, right? Because the last thing that teenagers want is any more adults in their lives, okay? They're not interested, I got it. We need to try to chip away at that, but not just to extract information, but to encourage them to live their lives, to not be afraid. They don't need to be. We got their safety at heart.
Just if I can interject, initially in this presentation I said, we have an extraordinary counseling staff at the high school. We do. But we also have some pretty extraordinary adults in this building every single day who care about your children immensely. So, if they don't have a significant relationship with a counselor. They may have one with the assistant principal. If they don't have one with the assistant principal, it might be the physics teacher. If they don't have one with the physics teacher, it could be the aide in the math classroom. So please, have your children reach out, especially if they have these kind of concerns. And that adult that they respect will direct them, encourage them, support them, and ultimately make sure they get the support they need. So it is an extraordinary high school, and we're very blessed to have the people we have working for us.
I'm sure I gotta move this. I'm Karen Diamond. I live in Madbury, and my son is a middle school student. And you guys, I think you guys have done a tremendous job. It's a lot of work. You've done fantastic, and you've done a great job addressing the high school. My son has a lot of classmates with high school students as siblings, so I'm wondering if there are any plans or ideas around addressing the middle school's concerns, because the kids are talking.
Sure.
Whether anybody's there or not, they're talking, so I'm wondering if you guys are planning on talking to them directly.
We absolutely are. I have reached out through Holly to the sergeant to do a similar presentation to the middle school kids. And in terms of the protocols that Suzanne talked about at the high school relating to our high school staff, is what's called sweeping through all the bathrooms between periods as they're walking through the hallways, they're going in, so they're being hypervigilant to the bathroom situation. And we've asked the middle school principal, Jay Richard, to implement that same practice at the middle school. I've also asked Jay to implement the bathroom sign out in each classroom. And as Suzanne said, that sounds kind of draconian, but really it's an accountability issue if we know who's been in and out of the classroom. And the high school kids have taken it extremely well. They could have, said, geez, you guys don't trust us, and gone down that path. They didn't. They have accepted the new protocols because they understand the situation and they want it to end. So the three things that we did up here, we're in the process of doing at the middle school. And part of it also is the proximity of the two schools, literally walking distance back and forth. And so we are treating them as a campus as opposed to individual buildings. And Suzanne and Jay are in constant communication. Again, one of the strengths of our district is the middle school and high school have a tight relationship. You heard a parent come up and say, my 8th grader comes up to the high school for math. We have staff that move between the two buildings, and the administrative relationship could not be stronger. So communication between the two buildings is very strong. Same issues, but a little less perhaps understanding when we're dealing with 11 and 12 and 13-year-olds. They don't have the same sense as the juniors and seniors that the sergeant talked to about what's really going on. And so it is important to get them good, solid, accurate information. So we're in the process of doing that. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mark Fonsack. I have 2 boys in the high school. I'm from Madbury. And I appreciate everything that people are doing and the time that everyone's putting into this. I had a question about what you've asked of the kids. I don't have any problem with anything that anybody's asked of the kids, but I think just as you've asked, you said the one thing that parents can do to help you is to communicate with their kids and basically try and come up with a name. But have the kids been asked for ideas? Not to prevent this, but to make progress on identifying people, and have you gotten feedback from the kids that is useful?
Sure, the high school principal did a pretty amazing thing. I thought she took control of the advisor-advisee program at the high school. And so it's like a 20-minute period in the middle of the day where the kids are in smaller groups with an adult, and that adult is either a teacher or administrator. And has had every single student and advisor-advisee write to her, basically saying, how is this going? Suzanne, you want to address this a little bit more?
Yeah.
So she literally has a box full of letters and notes from in the old-fashioned way, on paper and pencil, as opposed to computer, and has literally read them all. So, Suzanne, you want to share that?
So that was one of the things that we wanted to know right away. On Friday, we rearranged our schedule before vacation. We had Sergeant Day come in and we flip-flopped. So when 9th and 10th were here in the auditorium, 11th and 12th were in their advisory groups, and they were having a conversation with their advisory group. But before they had that conversation, before there was any discussion, I wanted them to process on their own and to give us information. So one of the first things they did was they sat down and they wrote to us. A lot of them wrote to me, some of them wrote Dear Ms. Philippone. And they expressed how they're feeling. Some of the questions we asked were, how are you feeling about all of this? What are your thoughts? Do you have any thoughts? Or do you have any suggestions for us? That was another question that we had. And do you have any information you can give us? So, and a lot of them had some of the kids had great ideas about, they asked questions, some of them had questions about the cameras in the building, have you looked at all the cameras, have you been able to identify writing, they talked about handwriting, they talked about different things like that. Some of them just used it as an opportunity to talk about their anxiety, the stress they're feeling, the frustration. Some of them actually said, I heard someone talking about this in the lunchroom, and they gave some information for us that way. So we did have a lot of great feedback. We've done this a couple of times with the students too, so when we had our evacuation drill, the administrative team broke up and we went to advisory groups and we spoke to the kids about they had so many questions that we went there and we answered all their questions, different kinds of emergency procedures, and when would we do this and when we would do that. And so we've been trying very, very hard to engage the kids in that conversation, not just through this, but also prior to this.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. It just strikes me it's going to be the community at the school that solves this problem. And that, I don't mean the identifying of the current person, but shifting things so that this doesn't catch us off guard and this doesn't become a regular thing. Somehow that culture, that's got to come from the kids. And I think you guys are well positioned to help that happen. But I don't see how a reactionary mode helps us next year, as much as the kids engage with school where a loss of school is a problem for them too, where they identify how to value it slightly differently, perhaps. I don't know.
Yeah, and I agree, and that was part of the reason why we had that conversation, and we will continue to engage the kids because we talk to the faculty all the time about this in faculty meetings in different places, and we also need to be engaged with the kids as well.
Hi, Jennifer Reef. I have my youngest here in high school. Thank you very much for doing this and taking your time to answer all these questions. I feel like a lot of what was said here tonight was everything that I've been feeling, had questions about. It's really hard to obviously talk about a difficult subject like this, but I had two things that I wanted to ask, and I do feel the same as the first speaker about, these students really need to know that there is a consequence for this, and with my own son, I don't feel like that is really being communicated. I'm sure it was said during the assembly, and I can go look it up in the student handbook or go through the school board policies, but I'm not sure that information is really being hit hard, communicated. Perhaps maybe in one of those emails it's actually spelled out so that someone like me, where I know where to find it, other parents might not know where to find it. One of my points that I'd like to bring up is that one of the great strengths of Oyster River is that they allow students that are young, when they come here, become young adults that are very responsible. And I want to be careful that our school does not take away a lot of those privileges that Oyster River really fosters here. And I was pleased to hear that the bathroom privileges is a temporary thing, because I don't want us to become TSA, where everything our students are going to do, there's an adult there, constantly monitoring them. We have to let our students, make choices in very difficult situations, and when we're constantly standing over them, we can't allow that to happen. The other thing was, how much is all of this costing our district, our town, and our state. We have exhumed so many resources. Who's paying for this? I know a lot of it is our taxpayer dollars, but how much extra money, is given to having the state police come with dogs sniffing in our school, 3 times in 1 week? Thanks.
Well, I mean, that, it hasn't been brought down to dollars and cents, but I think your question is right on, because it's not just a disruption, although the disruption to the kids, their education is what we principally get our concerns around, and their safety. There are significant asset reallocation. We talked privately, I was talking to the sergeant about the very issue of where his resources are. He literally has 4 bomb dogs. Now, in the first incident, they were a couple hours away. The last incident, they were in Concord doing training. All 4 of them showed up, and that's when we did the lockdown, and the dogs went through the building. We had staff who guided the state police through the building, because they don't know the building. And we had staff volunteer to guide the officers through. So, the cost is both tangible, it's real, but it's also intangible. What is it costing our kids to lose a half day of school, to lose 2 hours of school? And so your question is absolutely accurate. The chief's resources here in town, Holly's dedicated here. Our relationship with the police department is that we actually pay for Holly to be here so that we can have a dedicated officer at the high school. But when he puts 3 officers up here, that's a burden on the taxpayers again. So on a normal day, Holly's doing her business. She's enjoying her life as an SRO. She's got important things that she does. She gets to meet and greet kids. And, she's formed these great relationships with them. On a bad day, she's spending a lot of time investigating, what we perceive to be, a nonsensical bomb threat, and we're spending a lot of administrative time. So Suzanne, as principal, Mark, Mike, Corey, Heather, they're all spending administrative time trying to figure out who the knucklehead is, to be blunt. And that means that teacher evaluations may not be getting done, that events and programs, advisor-advisee pieces, they get involved in the student's life. Takes Corey away from this athletic responsibility. It just goes on and on. The costs, as you talk about this, just are never ending. Todd and I being up here when we have responsibilities that we need to accomplish for the school board, all of the things that aren't getting done ultimately have to be done. And so it is a redirection of resources. It's a redirection of state police resources, local police department resources, and school resources. I have a community friend who tells me that the high school runs at $10,000 an hour. You can probably put a name to that person. He's a great guy, and he's constantly letting me know how much things cost. And so from his perspective, I don't know if his number's accurate, but what he wanted me to know is when I sent the kids down over the hill to the middle school, that was $10,000 worth an hour worth of effort lost. So, I'm not verifying that's the number. It actually could be the number, knowing him, but there is a real cost to all of this beyond the emotional and educational loss costs. Yes. How about you be the last question? It's 8:30. The panel will stay and mingle if you want to talk to the sergeant or the chief or the SRO or the principal or me, and we'll hang around. I have a whole slew of administrators who came tonight to be available, so why don't you close us?
Okay, a little bit of pressure. Darlene Smith, I have a junior here at the high school, and now a very nervous 8th grader.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to first say thank you for your time and your effort. I don't think I'm not speaking for the community, but I don't think that there's a reasonable person out there that can fault how you communicated with us. All of our kids, I'm looking around, every single parent who has a child here has a phone. So we knew what was going on. I would much rather you do what you need to do and then let us know.
Perfect
That's-
closing. Thank you so much.
That's my first point. But like I said, I am also all for a nuanced approach. But I, in closing, want to share a kind of sad conversation that my son had with my daughter this weekend. As they were talking about it, and she was sharing the incident at the middle school with him, he who was frustrated that he's losing time, and that, like, I actually think he used the word knucklehead, just wants to know who's doing this.
That was a quote.
Also, it is frustrating, it's a small community, and you're trying to send them a message that this is a felony and that they shouldn't be doing this. And I understand that every event is different, but you're sending them very different messages when they see that a person that has been responsible for a previous event is walking around the school. So you can talk to them about how severe this is, but you know, it's like a parent saying, I'm gonna punish you, I'm gonna punish you, I'm gonna punish you, and then you don't, and then you wonder why the behavior doesn't change.
Sure.
And I understand you can't tell us anything, and that's fine, but he shared that with his sister. Like, he said they want us to take it seriously, but then they don't punish kids who are doing things that are wrong. And he wasn't even talking just about this, he was talking about other things where the kids at the high school feel that kids are engaging in illegal and risky behavior and aren't getting punished. So then when it elevates to something like this, and like you said, it's a small community, and they see that there absolutely were ramifications for their students, the student that they didn't see, but when they see that student back walking amongst them, it makes it very hard for them to understand both of the messages that they're being given. And I just want you as a superintendent and you as a principal to understand that, because you're giving them two different messages.
I appreciate that, thank you. On that note, let's call the evening a close. Again, we'll hang back here and have individual conversations with anybody who would like. But I really do want to say thank you for giving up 90 minutes of your evening to be with us, and let's hope this is all ending. Thank you.
Thank you.